how to teach you and your child how to coexist at home. Not here, not in detention, or not in the Department of Family and Children Services, but at home. We're going to teach you how to parent your child, and we're going to teach you how to relate to your parent. So there's multisystemic, there's functional family therapy, there's IFE services, and all of those are mental health services to an extent, but it is for the family, and they are designed to keep that family intact and to keep that child out of trouble, but to teach the parent how to teach the child how to stay out of trouble.
Who's controlling all these organizations and programs? Who's administering that from your side?
From the court side?
Yeah, like you can mandate, hey, I need you to go do X, but who's allowing, let's say, who's vetting,
or who's overseeing, or
who's overseeing, okay, this group or this organization or that organization is okay, who's overseeing?
So we typically will have contracts with certain providers, and those providers have been vetted from different agencies, because the court, from the judge's standpoint, that neutrality has to exist. So the judge doesn't have any control over those providers or who they are, but we do have authority over whether or not those services are adequate, or whether or not you're meeting the needs that we are trying to address. And so if you have a MST program and you have an MST program, and I have a child that needs to go, if your history has been that when this child is coming back, nothing has changed, or you've been ineffective for something that you are doing or are not doing, then I'm going to give the program to your colleague, because his program is meeting the needs, right? And so, although I don't select the provider and I don't enter into those contracts, typically a lot of those providers have been vetted by a state agency.
Okay, so it runs through the state, they get qualified by the state, and then those programs or entities are available as a resource that you can look at, and then you can make a determination if that resource is actually adequate or not.
So what'll happen, let's say it comes from the dependency side, which would be a child that has been neglected. That would be a dependent child, been neglected or abused in some way, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, right, or neglect. You're not feeding, you're not clothing, housing the child, dependent. Or so most of those programs then are going to come from the Department of Family and Children Services, which is from the State Department of Health and Human Services. So those contracts or those providers then come from the state agency. I oversee the progress on what I've ordered to be completed.
I see.
That's it. If it's a delinquent child, and that is a child who has committed what would be a crime if the child were an adult, then those services typically will come from the Department of Juvenile Justice, or DJJ. And then similarly, they will have selected those providers. In independent counties, which Clayton is, our probation officers.
Independent counties?
Yes.
What does that mean when you say independent counties?
So, we're independent of the state. So like Clayton County Juvenile Court has its own probation office. Some counties, and typically in the smaller counties, they rely solely on DJJ. So if a child in a dependent county is placed on probation, it's the State Department of Juvenile Justice who then is that child's court officer, who is doing the report, because we get a background report before we are able to send. So it's called adjudication and disposition. Adjudication. Let me slow down. Child comes to court for a delinquent act. He has committed what would be a crime if he or she were an adult. Then that's the trial. If you're an adult, is an adjudication, and then we disposition, which would be a sentencing if you were an adult. So the terms are different because children are not convicted of crimes. They're adjudicated delinquent, and then even if a child is adjudicated delinquent, so let's say that you steal a car, right? But you're an upstanding child and you were with your knucklehead friends, and they were out and they convinced you to go steal this car. I can adjudicate you and say, yeah, they stole that car. And so, yes, you did it. Two of you come, you be co-defendants, right? And I can say, you know what? Yes, he did it. He's adjudicated, but I don't believe he's delinquent. And so there will be no disposition for you. In the same way I could disposition you and say, yep, he did it. And look at this record. He's been doing this. And so he is a delinquent child.
That's normally reversed. It would be
Yeah.
and record, and, yeah.
Now, why you gotta?
That's something people do. That's not what I would do.
So
Question. You're running for Superior Court.
I'm running for Superior Court.
Judge, right?
Superior Court judge, yes.
How do things change from juvenile to a Superior Court judge?
Okay.
How does it change?
Okay,
What happens?
and thank you for asking that. Because, so in Georgia, at 17, a person is considered an adult for criminal justice purposes. Now, there's not any other purpose for which a 17-year-old is considered an adult. For instance, a 17-year-old cannot vote. They cannot join the service without parental consent. They can't contract. They can't buy alcohol. They can't do any of that, right? But if they commit a crime, they're going to an adult jail. They're doing that at a time when their brain is not fully developed. The prefrontal cortex is still developing, and that is a part of the brain that controls impulse and reason.
Right. That's been scientifically looked at. So.
Science has backed that up, and science has shown that. And so that's why things like your insurance, if you have a teenage son, your insurance is through, if you have a 22-year-old son, insurance is through the roof, right? And God forbid they get a speeding ticket, because then it goes through some more rules, right? Because they understand that decision-making function that controls that part of the brain is not yet developed. So insurance knows that they're going to make bad choices, so they kind of pre-plan for that. Criminal justice doesn't pre-plan for that. So we take the 17-year-old child and we treat him like an adult. We'll put him in an adult jail at a time when they are still children and they are still developing. And so that's one difference. That's one difference, because 16-year-olds are not 16 and under. If they stay in juvenile court, they are not convicted of crime. So they don't have a criminal history that anyone can get except certain law enforcement agencies or the service if they try to join. Right, because then they have to carry a firearm, right? So there are certain things that you still have to manage.
Do we know why it happened that way?
I do not know why, because it varies. Like some states are, like New York, I think is 16 that you are considered an adult for criminal justice purposes. So a lot more states, and Georgia has actually tried to raise the age. There have been issues on the ballot for several years where they were trying to raise the age of juvenile court to go to 18, which would at least coincide with when you're considered an adult for other purposes.
And who? That doesn't go on like a voting ballot. That's changed where?
If it ever makes it out of the legislative session, then it could possibly go on the ballot, or it could just be where the governor signed. So it would depend on how it came out of that session, right? So we don't get to vote on everything. Sometimes they just say, now this is the law,
okay, right?
So, and there have been efforts for as long as I can remember, at least from 2009, once I took the bench, I can remember those efforts to increase the age in juvenile court, to kind of just let it coincide with what the law is in other areas.
So you're fighting a battle, you will be fighting a battle on multiple fronts here.
On multiple fronts.
Right.
So the reason that I think that Superior Court, that I want to be in Superior Court, twofold. One is that will put someone on the Clayton County bench who has an understanding of what happens in juvenile court, because I've done it for so long. That's one. But two, I believe that there should be a youthful offender program, because 17-year-olds are not adults, in my opinion, and they have that handicap of the brain, so to speak. I think that there are programs that could address some of the things they do, or that they might find themselves in front of a judge for, outside of a life-crippling felony conviction. I think that there are programs that could address what the child is trying to address, or trying to achieve through that criminal behavior, because it becomes criminal behavior at 17, even though like the day before, if it's your birthday, it was a delinquent act. That there are other programs that we could employ that would allow the child to achieve, to learn certain skills, to improve the workforce, to allow them to continue educational efforts, and then to come out and still be productive, right? And all of their liberties would still be intact. You can still vote. You can still, get scholarships and go to colleges and live in certain neighborhoods. You still be able to do all that. So that's the program that I would like to champion in Clayton County Superior Court. That is my number one reason for wanting to be there, and also then to bring some reason to the appointments in juvenile court, and an understanding of why juvenile court judges should do juvenile court work, and where their focus should be.
Now, these programs, the program that you're championing, does that exist now, or is this something you have to create?
It is something that I will create. Something that I want.
kind of ahead of that.
I'm definitely working on it, right?
Okay.
Because you got to hit the ground running. You're elected, you get a 4-year term, and that sounds like a long time. It really isn't. When you have to create a brand new program, you got to get people to come in and buy into it, right? Because if I'm trying to get these people jobs and education skills or trades, somebody has to buy into that.
Well, listening to you explain it, it sounds like you know what's needed. So what's next? You understand it. So what's next? What happens next? Do you have to go out and find infrastructure to support that?
Yes. You got to get funding, and some of that will come from grants. Some of that will come because actions still have consequences, right? So now at 17, you know right from wrong. You do know that, and so there has to be a cost or some penalty. I just don't believe that it should cripple you for the rest of your life.
Right.
I think it should always follow you. God forbid what I did at 17 was still following me today. God forbid, right? Now, it was lawful. Let me clear that up because I can imagine the speculation.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you cleared that up because I was sitting here thinking, I wonder what in the world she did.
Yeah, no, it was lawful. But, but just think, if you think back to your 17-year-old self, and if you know what I mean, if you had to account for those things for the entire rest of your life, that would be tough, right? So, and then you gotta partner with outside organizations because I can't provide any technical training, none of that, or beyond a certain point, I can't provide educational skills, and I can't provide a job for everybody that may come through the program. So you got to get employers. You want to get an education system behind you. You want to get some mental health services behind you, because traumas that began early in life will cause you to do certain things throughout your life if you never address it. Mental health treatment is not something that we as a community have always opened our arms to. We're becoming more open to the idea because I'm not crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. And that whole idea needs to be reframed.
Do you have allies?
In terms of?
From a supportive standpoint that understand where your mind is at and what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And they're on board.
I do. I have some people on board.
Okay.
And I will even reach out to some of the people that I was bringing into the juvenile court program. See, I wanted to do that. The reason that I wanted to give those kids jobs and opportunities, because if you put money in their hand, they don't have to take it out of yours. That's kind of a theory that I just have made up in my mind. If we show them what it means and what it feels like to work for something, they may be less likely to go and try to destroy what someone else has worked for, or take what someone else has worked for, once you know how it feels, right?
So that feeling of reward and gratitude.
Yes.
As well, that comes
Yes.
along with that. You about to say something?
No, but I will.
Go ahead.
So, in running your campaign, because I know it's a little bit different than other state offices, how, in that case, how do you, from your viewpoint, because I know you see what happens in the other political arenas, how is that different? Because the law is the law, basically, as you want to say. The law is the law in terms of how it's set up, what it is just kind of defined, but there's some perception, interpretation. But for you, what's the difference in running for a judge position or a position like that, as opposed to running for like Senate or governor or something like that?
Well, for one, I'm not interested in that level of political involvement. I know that change can be achieved from legislators and senators and representatives, absolutely, because they write the law. But I like instant gratification, and so if I can develop a program and I can see this child or this person through this program, then they graduate and they get a little certificate and a celebration, that gratifies me. That lets me know that I helped at least one person. The one person can come into my program and complete it successfully and go on to do well. That would mean the world to me. If I can keep one child, one 17, 18, 16, 15-year-old child out of prison, that would mean the world to me, and I see it immediately. And yes, you can achieve that in the legislature by writing a law that says something different, but it takes a while to move through the process, and you don't really see it. You may know that it's out there, but you don't see it. See, I get to see what happens with my kids. And so for all these years, I've had several kids, as sad as it may be, who were there with me the whole time that I was in court. Like, they literally grew up with me. A lot of those kids called me auntie, or, they would leave and they would say, I really love you, Judge Butler. I'm not going to do the right thing, but I love you, Judge Butler.
I'm not going to do the right thing.
But I love you,
I know guys.
and girls, but at least they were honest. And they, I want to make you proud, but I just can't do this. That's where they were, and that's honest, and I understand that. And when they would age out of my court, I would give them my number, and I'd say, please call me if you find yourself in trouble, or if you need somebody to talk to, give me a call. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But to be able to see a child have an opportunity for a fresh start, even though they're 17, right? Because that's the ripe old age of 17, like you're an old man. I just feel like they deserve a chance to have a happy, healthy life, despite making a bad decision. Now, will that work in every instance? Absolutely not. Because you can't have a murderer come through that program. There's some things that are not going to work for that program. But for some minor things, I think that program is ideal.
Like the big financial talk now is in the black community where, you kind of underserved because you don't understand finances, and they don't teach it in schools. Now that I'm thinking and listening to you talk and I don't know what happens now, but, I have a 11-year-old and my older daughter's in college, but still, even at the school they don't teach the consequences of this. It seems like there should be something there to help you, guide you on your way on that, because you don't figure it out until you get in trouble, and then you start seeing,
until you get bad credit. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah,
once you get, because when you go to college, I know when I went to college, it seemed like every credit card company opened me, and I did. I opened them. I was like, look, I have credit cards.
My question is there a reason why?
Why it's not taught?
Well, yeah, it seems like there should be a program, or at least maybe some type of extension that maybe comes in and say, okay, this offer, this is a program, let the kids come sit for an hour or two, maybe twice a week. They understand, hey, this is how the world works to a degree on that side of it.
And if I'm not mistaken, and I definitely don't want you to quote me, but I believe that Clayton County is actually implementing some of those programs.
Really?
So when I first started and I said the media portrays us in a certain way, Clayton County Public Schools are doing amazing things, but you're not going to hear those things. You're going to hear about the mom who got on the school bus.
Right.
You'll hear those things, but you're not going to hear the great things that are happening in that school system.
Yeah, I'm not aware.
They're doing amazing things to work for those. They're developing amazing programs. They are really working to
Is that the public?
our public schools.
Public school system.
Clayton County has amazing public schools, and they have people in charge at this point who are really trying to turn everything around for our students, who are really trying to make sure that they are prepared when they leave our schools, Clayton County Public Schools, to whatever the next level may be.
Designs by Rona Stone.
Made by Baldwin Creek the brand.
Available at baldwincreech.com.
What's 0 to
3.
Yeah, what is that?
0 to 3 is it's a program that focuses on those primary stages of development from the time that you are
So that's
conceived.
3 years old? Is that what we're talking about?
From 0 to 3 years old.
Okay, go on.
0 to 3. So it talks about the changes in the brain development, it means for that child to have a healthy bond with a primary caregiver, what happens when that bond is broken, and what future impacts those things have. And so in the, I don't want to get the years wrong, there was an ACEs study. Have y'all heard of that study?
I have it. Can you tell us?
And so that was a study that was done by Kaiser, either in the 70s or
Kaiser
80s.
Okay.
And it was a Kaiser study, and it watched what happened in certain. So they picked a group of kids, and they followed these kids actually throughout life, even into adulthood. And if you had certain traumas happen at early ages, then that was predictive of how your life would progress, or certain things. Health issues were predictive. Criminogenic factors were predictive. Mental health predictive. Addiction, drug and alcohol addiction, predictive from trauma. So you can have the score 0 to 5, and the higher your number, then the lower your outcomes in later life, even into adulthood. And so the idea then is to address traumas at that age between 0 and 3, when the brain is doing the most developing. And people didn't like, when I took the class, it was called, the services were called infant mental health programs. People didn't like the idea that there were mental health services that were needed for children. But what we were really trying to address were the traumas that were caused by the adults in the child's life. And so it taught parents how to interact with the child. Like, you can't just sit your child down with a tablet or a phone, that you actually need to speak to that child, and that increases that child's educational outcomes. And so that's another. So there's a 1,000,000-word gap in children in certain neighborhoods, and children in marginalized neighborhoods, and children in wealthy neighborhoods. Because in wealthy neighborhoods, you have the time and the ability to sit down and talk to your child, even if it's about, okay, so mommy's going to make dinner. I'm going to make chicken for dinner. And so now mommy's watching. So if you're talking to that child versus the TV, so when there's a two-dimensional interaction with the child, does not yield the same educational outcomes in the future.
That time is a big deal, isn't it?
Yes, and the interaction, the ability, right?
Right.
But then if you have that ability, then you can do it. But if you're focused on, where am I going to get the money
Right.
to feed my child, or to
Which
buy
goes
these
back to your
diapers,
other-
right? So you have to give people adequacy. So that's something that we have to address.
The 0 to 3, is that a national program?
It is. So the fellows come from, so I'm a
And
0 to
you're-
3
and you're a
fellow.
fellow.
Yeah, I
You're
completed
0
that
to 3.
fellowship.
Yeah.
Yes, I did in
Right.
2014 to 2016.
Right.
So 2-year program, and you're supposed to develop. So it is for leaders. They want leaders because they want systemic change, because they want better outcomes for children, right?
Right.
And so they pull those fellows from all across the world. It's an amazing thing. So in my class, we had a guy from Australia. In the last couple of classes, there have been people from Africa, and so they try to pull from every continent. It's a beautiful thing. But what was your question? I kind of got off track.
No. I read that you were a 0 to 3 fellow, and so you're. I will view you as an expert in this category right here, and you got an extensive background as far as dealing with kids and what happens. And I was just, interested. I didn't understand when I first saw it. I wasn't, because I hadn't heard of it before.
Right, and so if you don't work in the field in some respect, I actually was an outlier. I came from the bench because I wanted to do a Safe Babies court team, right? Because we know that court team,
a Safe
Babies
court team,
right? Because so in dependent children, if there's harm or a threat of harm, or we believe the child has been abused, then we're going to remove that child from the mother, from the harm. We're going to take the child out of the way of the harm, right? But we understand that removing that child from his or her primary caregiver, particularly at that early age, causes a lot of harm as well. Can't necessarily say more harm, because it depends on the nature of the dependency, but it causes harm as well, and it causes lifelong harm. Back to the ACEs study, right? Because then you're breaking that bond. And so the child is attached even at birth, because while inside they can hear mom, and they can hear dad. They know, so those are people to whom they have an attachment, which is why immediately after birth, if the baby's well, typically they're going to take that baby and place it on the mom's chest, right? And she's gonna interact with that child immediately, and that bonding is critical. But it continues, that bonding, and the need for that bonding continues. That's why babies, when they see a stranger and the stranger reaches out and the baby kind of turns back to that person they're familiar with, right? They're attached and bonded. Well, when you break that bond from a dependency removal, then you're causing harm as well. Safe Babies court teams then concentrate on finding other supports or other means to still keep the baby safe, but still in contact with those primary caregivers. So for instance, I could, if I know that believe that a child is in harm's way, but grandma is in town and got some aunties or good friends and uncles, then I may say, listen, if you bring me these relatives, and if they will agree on this contract to be an integral part, meaning they're going to be there to supervise and make sure you're not harming this child, and they'll stand in that role, then we'll leave this child with the mother, so that the attachment, so that we're not also causing harm, but we're still keeping the safe, because there are other eyes that will prevent harm and that are bound by court order and a contract to report if there's further abuses, right? And that's one way of reducing the harm of removal. So I want to do a Safe Babies team, and that was the project that I was able to, so because when you go in, you have to do a project that you're going to take that will then create the change that they're trying to see.
Right.
Now, were you able to implement that change, or is that something that you do the project and hope at some point you'll be able to?
I was not able to start that Safe Babies court team because the buy-in was difficult, because it also involved infant mental health, and so it was just tough to find people in Georgia who were certified. There was another judge who completed from Georgia who completed the program before me, a juvenile court judge, Peggy Walker. She also was trying to implement that program, and she had done a lot of the work, and she had the MDT meetings, but the program was more difficult to get started, because in order to get the funding for it, you have to have an expert in infant mental health, and we didn't at that time have them here in Georgia.
So where are they?
Where are those
Experts, where are they located?
there were a lot in Colorado. There were a lot in Colorado. Their children's hospital had a whole division, and that was back in 2014, 15, 16, when I was trying to do it all the way through 18, 20.
So you guys attempted to purge some help from there, but no takers?
Well, because we got to be able to have the services here, because our families are here.
Grab them from there where you.
Oh yeah, they're not coming.
Recruit, they don't want to leave.
No, and what we tried to do was try to get some people certified, some mental health professionals here certified, but while I was still doing the program, that did not occur.
What does it take? What type of background do you need to? Or is it like certifications? What is
above my realm? Those are, so they're psychologists and psychiatrists, and I don't know what their and so I don't know what their other requirements are for infant mental health.
Right.
I honestly don't, to be able to get that that tag, that name or whatever.
Right.
I don't know what else is required. We had 2 in my class.
Right.
South Carolina or South Carolina was one of them, and I cannot remember. Wales was in New York. So
It sounds very niche.
I think it's actually more common now because they changed the name. Right, so then we just call them like child care specialist, or what are the family, something else. They changed it. People don't like the idea.
More focused in that. Child care specialist sounds general.
And it sounds like actual child care.
Right.
But it's like, but if you say infant mental health, people just don't like the idea of it.
They don't like
because they think that, right? It sounds like, oh, now the babies are crazy. Now so then we're kooks, right? They think the babies are crazy. It's not at all what we're saying. We're saying there are certain needs that these children have, and we understand that falls under the realm of mental health. Yeah.
We talked a bit about your platform, your background. Is there anything regarding your campaign that we haven't talked about that you want to speak about?
Why I'm running now?
Okay.
And the reason that I'm running now is that I have finally recognized and accepted that the practices that are currently in place are inadequate to serve, I think, to adequately serve our population, particularly our younger population. There are not programs and processes in place that will allow our children to make a mistake and be able to rebound from it. And I want to implement that. I think that the impact of those failures are felt more largely by black and brown children, and there are other children, but we have a disproportionate impact on those things. All right? I think that justice should be for everybody. I think it should be fairly applied to everybody. I do not believe that there should be favorites or favors. One of the phrases in the oath that we take is that I will rule and I will serve without fear and without favor. And I think that people tend to forget that. And so if my best friend, let's say you're my best friend's son and you're his friend, but I don't know you, and you all come to court because I forgot which one of y'all was, okay. But he's gonna get better treatment because my best friend has said, hey, my son is coming to court, than you, who doesn't have access to me, right? And that can't be. That can't be. So the equity has to be restored to courts. Justice, if you look at the scales of justice, she stands this way, right? She doesn't see you, so she's not a respecter of person, and she has scales in her hand. And the evidence is the only determinative factor of what the outcome is. Not favor, not fear, not retribution or vengeance. None of those things should play a part in a court. And so that's what I want to bring.
Nice. So let me ask you this other question. Music-wise, what's your genre? What do you like?
Well, I like R&B. Well, I like Christian music because I like Christian music. That's, I'm going to sing gospel, right? I'm going to get up and sing gospel because I was raised in the church. But R&B is my genre.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Give me your top 5 R&B artists.
So my top 5 would be, I like Jasmine Sullivan. I like,
Men or women?
I like Jasmine Sullivan. Oh, I love me some Usher. Love Usher. What is her name? Can I pull out my phone? Can I look at my phone?
Sure, go ahead. Where's your phone at? Here, so you stay seated.
Okay. Because she is amazing.
So we got Jasmine Sullivan, we got Usher.
Hold on, it's locked up. Because this
After you get those top 5, I got a question for you.
okay. Because her name starts with an A, so she would be at the top. Algebra. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, I like Usher.
I love Algebra. And then I like my mom's favorite, which is Otis Redding.
Okay.
Does that count?
That count?
And I like Tyrone Davis because I'm old school.
I'm gonna ask you a question,
Okay.
but I don't want you to answer.
Okay.
Is R. Kelly the king of R&B?
Tell me don't answer.
Move right along.
He just likes to read your face. That's all he does.
What's your top 5?
My top 5.
What's your genre and your top 5?
I'm an R&B person. So if I went with my top 5, I'm not going to do them in order. So I'm going to go Anthony Hamilton, Usher, Chris Brown, R. Kelly's in that. Y'all forgive me, but okay. I really would need 10 because I missed out on all the ladies, but I can't not represent one of the ladies, and I got to put Mary J. Blige in there.
Oh, absolutely, Mary J. I don't know how I left her off.
Yeah, so I mean, you only get 5. So everybody that I didn't name, don't.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I didn't get a chance to throw Luther in there. So
oh yeah, you got to get Luther too. So really, you can't narrow it down to 5 because how do you not? I got to stop doing that. How do you not have Luther though? You got to have Luther.
I'll say my top 5 is fluid. So that's today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow might be something else.
Yeah. You didn't even mention Jasmine Sullivan or Algebra. How you not have Algebra? Yeah.
But it's what I listen, like Anthony Hamilton. Now he's definitely
now he is the man.
Total top 5 because I listen to him all the time, and he's been through a lot of my relationships, telling me you know, how bad and how good I am. So
Yeah.
That brings up something else. You know, I know all the topics that we've been discussing, they're very serious and needed. Do you have any fun? Do you do anything? Do you have a hobby or anything like that?
If I tell you,
relax?
you promise not to ask me to do it.
I don't know.
Okay, then I'm not gonna tell you. I'm not gonna tell you.
No.
we promise. Go ahead.
Then. So karaoke is my thing. I love karaoke. If you come over my house, you gotta sing karaoke. You walk in the door, the mic is standing there,
Really?
and you gotta sing, and then we're gonna do whatever you came. Like the cookout, I used to give concerts to my guests, whether they wanted them or not. I give them a little karaoke concert. So I do have fun. I do a lot of stuff. I love to travel. You know. Now you're gonna say it's not fun. Travel, I love to travel. That's my thing. Love to sing, karaoke. But I also like to read. Like reading is my thing, and I guess that's why education is my thing as well. And then like Jeremy has been my hobby forever,
Of course.
because he had football, or he had band, or he had basketball.
What's his major, by the way?
I'm gonna say medicine. I'm gonna say biology pre-med.
That's not
Now,
what
but
I
if you
said.
ask him, he's gonna say another answer.
Right. So he's trying to get his MBA. So let it be, Mom.
Because we spoke about real estate. What major are you pursuing?
Business management.
Business management. Okay, I got you. But it's medicine.
It's biology pre-med.
Got you.
It's okay, my brother. You do you. So, I want you to look at this camera right here. Tell everybody where they can find you. I know you're still working on the social media thing. She's coming. She's getting it together. But let everybody know where they can find you, your website, all that good stuff.
All right, thank you. You can find us at judgebutler.com and also on Instagram at elect Judge Deitra Butler.
Outstanding.
All right.
Outstanding. Hey, it was our pleasure. You have anything else?
I do not.
All right.
All righty. Time for karaoke? No, just kidding.
We gotta wrap up.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. That's a wrap. And just like we always like to say, here at the Gentleman of Style Show, we believe in better.
All right.
Till next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The Gentleman of Style Show.